Today we are facing some of the greatest challenges of our lives, from our health to political unrest, the environment, financial uncertainty, and the nation's racial divide. Welcome to Bill Myers Inspires. My idea for this show was to invite guests and get the conversation started, to take a deep dive into the issues that impact our world with an eye to exploring solutions. And we encourage our listeners to look within themselves to take decisive action to make a positive difference. Welcome to Bill Myers Inspires. I'm your host, Bill Myers, and I'm very excited today. First of all, the month of April is Jazz Appreciation Month, and I did not want the month to get by without me paying the proper respects and acknowledgments to the wonderful art form of jazz. And today, the title of our show is All That Jazz, America's Greatest Cultural Contribution with Alex Bugnon. So today we want to talk about how jazz is America's greatest cultural contribution to the world in the 20th century. And what is it about jazz that makes it so unique, mysterious, and powerful to inspire so many artists and social activists alike? What is it that the rest of the world found so infectious and attractive about America's jazz? Now, let me tell you a little bit about my guest today. Wonderful friend and recording artist, composer, jazz pianist, the great Alex Bugnon. But to do this properly, I've got to do this with music. So hold on just a second. And there it is. Alex Bugnon, for the last 3 decades, has been a New York-based pianist and composer. Alex Bugnon has been an energetic force on the contemporary jazz scene, in possession of chameleon-like skills befitting him. Born and raised in beautiful Montreux, Switzerland, world famous for the jazz festival that hosted thousands, Alex was predestined to be a musician and has recorded 17 best-selling albums on labels such as Sony, EMI, RCA, and released the last 2 on his own label, Xela Records, and received 2 Soul Train Award nominations, as well as receiving a Best New Jazz Artist Award from Black Radio Exclusive for his 1989 debut album, Love Season. Love Season was later certified gold, selling over 500,000 copies. Prior to his solo career, Alex performed as a sideman with Patty Austin, the late James Ingram, Earth, Wind and Fire, Freddie Jackson, and numerous gospel groups. Alex studied piano in Montreux, Salzburg, and the Mozarteum in Paris, and later at the Berklee School of Music in Boston. Please help me welcome my guest, Alex Bugnon. Welcome, Alex.
Thank you. It's good to be here, Bill.
Yeah, man. So I'm excited to have you here today, and I'm excited that you and I are going to have a conversation as it relates to this wonderful art form called jazz. But before we get going, man, I just want to back up and use this first segment to sort of get into your exposure to jazz. And we talked about the Jazz Festival in Montreux. So I think you have a compelling story, particularly, growing up. So I want you to set that stage as far as what your father was doing and what you were doing and the guys that came in your company when you were a youngster.
There's so much to say about the beauty of growing up like me, in the sense that of being in such a small town like Montreux, Switzerland, having such a big jazz festival. You cannot beat that because everybody came through Montreux. I remember my first show, I was 8 years old. I went to see Aretha Franklin. So numerous recorded concerts like Les McCann and Eddie Harris. I was there.
Wow.
I mean, all these things. Bill Evans, live in Montreux, with his trio with Jack DeJohnette. I was there with Eddie Gomez. I was at their show. I was at Santana's first show in Montreux, and you can even see me with my elbows right on the stage, looking at them. You cannot see me well, but I know it's me because I was like this, and I was in front of I think the bass player was called Dave Brown, the first bass player that Santana had, and I was right in front of him with my elbows on stage. When I saw this famous picture, I said, "That's me." So anyway, make long story short, I saw so many different acts growing up, and I think I was lucky, more lucky than even a lot of people in the United States, where the music is actually from, because we were all that greatness of music coming from the States was going down on Montreux once a year for 3 weeks. It's just an amazing place to grow up for the music appreciation, I feel. Yeah, and my parents were very close friends with Kenny Clark. Very close friend. My aunt even was married to Donald Byrd, my mother's sister. So that brought in such a number of different people to our house every year. Clark Terry was a really good friend of the family. Of course, Donald was my uncle.
Yeah.
So we have I had a very unusual way to grow up as a Swiss guy. So that really made me aware of the possibilities that were there for me if I wanted to take them, if I wanted to take the chance. I remember I was 13 years old. I was hanging out with Donald for the whole summer. He stayed in Switzerland, and I was kind of just hanging out with him, sleeping he had rented a chalet in Switzerland. I was sleeping there. His band was there. And I remember his whole day was spent by listening to music, practicing, transcribing, writing music, then rehearsal, then sound check, then show. And after a few days of that, I said to myself, this is what I want to do for a living. This is what I want. And that's what I wanted to be. At 14 years, I wanted to be a musician.
That is incredible. That is so incredible. And to be so fortunate. I mean, as you were just describing the different acts that you were exposed to as a youngster in Montreux, you mentioned, I mean, you started off with Aretha Franklin. You're talking about Carlos Santana. You're talking about a very diverse group as well as being the best in the world, coming in for 3 weeks onto your little town, That's amazing. That's a huge blessing, man. That's a huge blessing. And I thought you would be, again, perfect for this conversation. Go ahead, man. I'm listening.
You're listening to me? Do you want another story? Is that what you're saying?
Well, I mean, no, it's, I am excited, but you are right. Most young people and most adults don't have that level of exposure to the greats like that. You mentioned some of the names, and that's the wonderful thing about this area called jazz is how sort of transient it is as far as the musicians, and other music forms, pop music forms or whatever, you have a static band, this is the guitar player, this is the bass player, this is Ringo, this is Paul, this is John. And you have that same cast of characters, where in jazz, that door revolves constantly. And as you mentioned, your uncle, Donald Byrd, I had the privilege of crossing paths with him down at Indiana University. He was down there for a period of time working with David Baker. And I was in a high school jazz band. I think it was All City Jazz Band or something. And we went down and he did a clinic with us. So, man, that's amazing. That's amazing. Wow. So So I want to tackle this thing, man. So let me ask you before I even get into it. Some of the things I'm trying to identify what it is, not just from musicians, but also to identify from what the world at large says, you know, people that are non-musicians. What in the world is it that attracts them to this thing called jazz? So I decided to sort of do some Google searching and find out what other people are saying, and then we can sort of discuss. So one of the things is jazz has all the elements that other music has. It has melody, that's the tune of the song, the part you're most likely to remember. It has harmony, the notes that make the melody sound fuller. It has rhythm, which is the heartbeat of the song. But what sets jazz apart is the cool thing called improvisation. What do you think about that?
Totally agree.
You know, yeah, I do think it's core. You know, the improvisation element seems to be a real core and unique piece to it. And, but yet at the same time, you know, we have things like syncopation, the syncopated beats and that sort of thing, I think also are a huge contributor. And this next piece that I came across, some of this is like Wikipedia, man. I was just like touring around because I thought this will be interesting to chop it up with one of the greats, you know, just to talk about this is what everybody else says it is. What is jazz known for? Jazz is characterized by swing and blue notes, complex chords, call and response vocals, polyrhythms, and improvisation. Jazz has roots in West African culture and musical expression and in African American music traditions. What do you think about that?
Absolutely.
Well, I thought it was interesting the way they stated it, that jazz has roots in the West African culture. That would be very, very true. And that is where much of the polyrhythms and the call and response impact and influence comes from, truly. And it mentioned this thing about in African American music traditions, and I would argue at that point that I believe that jazz was probably the contributor to many of the other African American musical forms. You know, R&B and all these other forms certainly benefited from jazz. Hip hop has benefited tremendously from the footprint of jazz. You know, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, the thing that is the most appealing to jazz, everything that you stated, every thing that makes up jazz can be interchanged at any time. You can choose a little bit of that and a little bit of that, and you can make it your own. And to me, I think that's the it's lack of rigidity that makes it appealing and that makes it so widely accepted. All over the world, everybody wants to improvise, whether it's with the funk rhythm or with the swing rhythm or a 7/4 Indian rhythm. The improvisation and the rhythm, to me, is really what makes it appealing to a lot of people. And it seems that every group of people around the world kind of find their own little niche, but of jazz, what they call jazz. So it has a lot of influence from the States, and sometimes it doesn't, and we can argue that this is not jazz because it's, you know, it has to be it has to have a certain element of African American roots in order for me, in my definition. It's, you know, I came here to play black music, or I'll say it out loud, I came here to play black music, whether it's McCoy Tyner or Earth, Wind and Fire. I loved it all, but that's what I wanted to do. And I felt that really studying, analyzing, and playing as much as that music as I could would allow me, a little Swiss guy, even though I was exposed to that music at an early age, I had to catch up as far as playing it. in groups, especially in groups, and I didn't do that until I came to Berkeley. So, but yeah, to me, the African American element in jazz has to be there. It's imperative for me.
That's really key, man. You're really tapping on the door now. There's a piece I really want to explore that a little bit further, but we're going to have to take a break right now, and we will be back in just a moment. You are listening to Bill Myers Inspires, and today's program is in honor of Jazz Appreciation Month, and it's called All That Jazz with my special guest, Alex Bugnon. We'll be back in just a moment.
Today, we are facing some of the greatest challenges of our lives, from our health to political unrest, the environment, financial uncertainty, and the nation's racial divide. Tune in every Friday at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for Bill Myers Inspires, as he and his guests take a deep dive into the issues that impact our world with an eye to exploring solutions. Emmy Award-winning actor Bill Myers is an accomplished actor, jazz musician, filmmaker, writer, educator, and speaker. As a biracial man who's both black and white, Bill leverages his background, talents, and voice through creativity, compassion, and connection as activism for social justice to focus on uniting the divide and compelling change. Bill Myers Inspires encourages listeners to look within themselves and take decisive action to make a positive difference. For more information, visit his website, billmyersinspires.com, and sign in for the latest news and updates.
Are you a subject matter expert? Are you here to share your expertise with an audience waiting to hear from you in only the way you can deliver? Are you ready to have your voice amplified across the airwaves? Inspired Choices Network has a global radio platform streaming to millions of people across the world. Professionally produced and supported by an accomplished team every step of the way, you can broadcast from anywhere in the world, knowing your voice matters, and we ensure it is delivered with ease and efficiency. Eager to hear your message, the world awaits. Contact us today to become an Inspired Choices Network radio host. Email become a host at inspiredchoicesnetwork.com.
You're listening to Bill Myers Inspires here on the Inspired Choices Network. We're here every Friday at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Thank you for joining us. And now, let's get back to the conversation. We're back. You're listening to Bill Myers Inspires, and today our show is All That Jazz with my special guest, Alex Bugnon, as we sort of explore what it is that makes jazz so compelling and attractive, not only to folks in America, but also worldwide. So right before we went to the break, Alex, you mentioned that you came to America with one intention, and you said, I came to play Black music. And so as we're talking about jazz, and of course, with it being one of the earliest iterations, jazz and blues and spirituals and field songs and whatnot being the earliest of the Black American genres, what is it about that? I think maybe you're tapping onto something in the spirit of the music. And you say, you came to play Black music, and so can you share what that is from your perspective?
It's hard to explain the I mean, it's not hard to explain. It's the feeling that you get when you hear somebody sing the right phrase, play the right phrase, or play the right rhythm, or the right chord, like with Herbie or McCoy. It's just when I hear Earth, Wind, Fire sing or their songs, just George Duke, there is a warmth that takes me. that just engulfs me. And nothing else does that to me.
Yeah.
Nothing else does that to me. I know when it happened, I'm like, ooh, that was good. But this is that's the music that I chose, that I choose to follow and study. Like gospel, that is one of the first music that I played professionally when I came to the States. I did 3 years of aside from driving cabs and going to school, I was playing in gospel groups in Boston, really good ones too. One of them was Clara Mahomes and the Gospel Leviticus of Boston. We were going all over the country with this. We were opening for, I mean, there was so many big names. You know, Walter Hawkins, we were opening for them. Andre Crouch, we were opening for them. So it was, and that's another thing. Walter Hawkins and Andre Crouch are my heroes. I hear their tunes still to this day, and it just gives me goosebumps all over, you know.
So yeah, you're talking about something. I mean, we're past, the technical aspects of music, rhythm and so on and so forth. We're talking about feeling. We're talking about the spirit of something, something that resonates deeply. And I think that's really key. I had mentioned about the jazz having, the roots in Western Africa culture and musical expression. And there's a young lady from London, a filmmaker named Kadifa Wong, who I had on as a guest a couple of months ago. And she has a documentary film out called Uprooted. And it is about a documentary film about jazz dance. And it really raises a lot of questions, very similar to the music part of jazz music versus jazz dance. And that is, it really poses a very strong question about sort of the roots of the dance, and raises the question or concern as to whether whites are appropriating the art form or appreciating the art form, because of course she drew the distinction between the European school of dance, which would suggest everything came from ballet, and they're looking at stuff that came from Africa long before there was ballet. So, but very interesting how, those things were sort of interconnected, because we're talking about a feeling, we're talking about a story, we're talking about oppression, challenges and strife and pain and all those things that I think help contribute to that feeling of joy or rejoice or something, you know what I mean, when it's let loose and able to express itself. What do you think about that? I mean, I thought about her film, and I hope that you get a chance to see it. Again, it's called Uprooted, and hopefully that will be released widely sometime soon where you can check that out. But so does that feel like, does that connect some dots for you, Alex, as far as trying to get our arms wrapped around this thing called jazz?
Well, let me just respond to this appropriation question, which I agree that it's going on. Appropriation to me is, for example, the white appropriation of African American music. That's what we're talking about. So just to be clear. Okay. It's definitely going on for someone who's white, who, for example, let's take a piano player. Okay. Coming up with whatever he's doing, whether it's funky, whether it's straight ahead, and has absolutely zero knowledge of the lineage that preceded everybody that's with greatness. I could say Herbie, Chick, and McCoy, and Keith Jarrett, down to Hank Jones, Red Garland, Wynton Kelly, and going all down the line, all the way to Jerry Roll Morton, for example, or Scott Joplin. So I think music is public as long as you acknowledge where it came from, and you take the time, and you're respectful enough to study what preceded your era. And that's, to me, if you do these things, I wouldn't say that I wouldn't call it appropriation. It's just being in love with this music. As long as I'm respectful of knowing what preceded the lineage of musicians, all the way to the beginning, as much as I can go back.
Sure.
And totally acknowledge where it comes from. Nobody should be afraid of saying that it's an African American art form. I'm white. I'm saying it. I have no problem saying it. I've said it throughout my whole career.
Right.
There is a taboo in this country, and also in Europe, where people are afraid of acknowledging that it came from there. For white musicians, not all of them, of course, but there is a definite number of musicians who will never say thank you or this is great music. I'm playing black music. I'm playing it my way, but it's black music still. It shouldn't be a taboo. It should be such a natural way to speak, and nobody should be afraid of doing that. But people do it either out of fear, or they want to just hold on to their little cocoon, or they're afraid of competition, or they're just plain ignorant and sometimes racist.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, no, and I think I when I was referring to the appropriation part, which I certainly was not trying to suggest that white people can't play jazz or nothing like that. I think what I was talking about was the narrative of its origin, taking credit for it. Like, that's mine. I actually created it. That's the appropriation I'm talking about, where it's like, whoa, no, you didn't, which is a, robbery and all that. But no, I mean, but that makes a lot of sense, man. It really is so important to acknowledge the shoulders of all the giants on which we stand, and so that lineage is important. And so, I'm with you, man. I mean, I what I love about jazz, and I think one of the things is that it is open. It is an open form for people of whatever cultural background. They are welcome. You know what I mean? To step into the jazz arena. I mean, once they, sort of understand the idiom and everything else, I think that was jazz is certainly was at the forefront of the civil rights movement as far as being a vehicle that brought blacks and whites together, albeit in a limited capacity initially, because blacks still had to come through the back door and still couldn't stay at the hotel. They had to, those other things, but it was an opportunity, great theater opportunity for audiences to see that blacks and whites could coexist on a stage and actually contribute to one another, get along. And not only that, but, really create some dynamic music, So, and I love that the Martin Luther King, I refer to it often. It's the 1964 opening address for the Berlin Jazz Festival that he did. And it's a very beautiful piece, but he talks about the idea that we all have the blues. We all have these pain and these sufferings and all these sorts of things. So that's the common ground that jazz presents us, is we can all bring our own story, our own voice to the table, and it's welcome. And that's not true of other art forms. I mean, you'd be hard pressed to find that welcome mat in in classical orchestra. I mean, we could just go on and on and on. I mean, most rock bands, even though the origin of that largely is attributed to a whole lot of black folks at the beginning of rock or rock and roll as well. And so, you know, but yeah, it's very interesting how all that that works. But jazz is always one of those things where you always can look up on the stage and see a mix of people. You know, it's not uncommon. I guess that's what I'm trying to say. It's not a shock. So yeah, man. So when we come, we're going to get ready for a break now again. And then when we come back, I want to talk about something else that's relative to the roots of jazz. And that is, well, I'll just hold on to that thought until we come back. You're listening to Bill Myers Inspires, and I'm here with my special guest today, Mr. Alex Bugnon. And the title of our show is All That Jazz, as we pay our respects to jazz during this April Jazz Appreciation Month. We'll be back in just a moment.
Today, we are facing some of the greatest challenges of our lives, from our health to political unrest, the environment, financial uncertainty, and the nation's racial divide. Tune in every Friday at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for Bill Myers Inspires, as he and his guests take a deep dive into the issues that impact our world with an eye to exploring solutions. Emmy Award-winning actor Bill Myers is an accomplished actor, jazz musician, filmmaker, writer, educator, and speaker. As a biracial man who's both black and white, Bill leverages his background, talents, and voice through creativity, compassion, and connection as activism for social justice to focus on uniting the divide and compelling change. Bill Myers Inspires encourages listeners to look within themselves and take decisive action to make a positive difference. For more information, visit his website, billmyersinspires.com, and sign in for the latest news and updates.
You're listening to Bill Myers Inspires here on the Inspired Choices Network. We're here every Friday at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Thank you for joining us. And now, let's get back to the conversation. We're back. You're listening to Bill Myers Inspires. I'm your host, Bill Myers, and today we are talking about all that jazz with my special guest, Mr. Alex Bugnon. So, Alex, there's a few other elements to jazz and the music and the freedom and the oppression and the freedom from oppression that I want to discuss that I think are very profound, that extend beyond just the music itself, and that is, do you know who named the 1920s as the sort of the jazz age?
Not sure. No.
Okay. The novelist F. Scott Fitzgerald termed the 1920s the jazz age. With its earthy rhythms, fast beat, and improvisational style, jazz symbolized the decade's spirit of liberation. At the same time, new dance styles arose involving spontaneous bodily movements and closer physical contact between partners. Now, that's what I'm talking about. Now, this is where I wanted to go with this, and that I needed to set that up with Mr. F. Scott Fitzgerald, because we were talking about a feeling. We're talking about something that happens as far as audiences because of the improvisational nature. It's like something's taking place and being created, never to be recreated the same way, in front of that audience. Every time, you know, at every moment, something's being created. And I thought I wanted to try to figure out, why do you suppose that jazz is connected to sex? Now, I say that because, you know, the roots of jazz, I mean, were the brothels and all that sort of thing. So I'm just curious, because I think that there's something very interesting in this idea of liberation, creation, all of this happening. And ironically, this art form has its roots in brothels. Why do you suppose that was the case? I've thought about this a lot, and I don't have an answer, but I just thought, well, maybe Alex does.
No. And wow, this is a lot. It was maybe played in the brothel, maybe. I mean, where else would you play except in the street or in the brothels and during that period? I mean, I don't know. This is not the knowledge that I'm just putting thoughts out there. I don't know.
So maybe we could suggest that it was because there wasn't the opportunities for blacks to perform openly in whether it be clubs or the theaters or vaudeville or whatever. Maybe it was the underground element because underground meaning because also during the same period was period of prohibition also. So all these little spots and what is the secret word and all the pimps and all the prostitutes, all the vices, all that stuff were sort of deeply connected to the jazz scene. And ironically, I think it's very interesting to note that even during the 50s and 40s, 50s, 60s, that a lot of the gigs for jazz players and the shows themselves were had shake dancers and all that. Again, that same element of sort of sexy was brought into that. They'd have a comedian or whatever, but when we think about the Cotton Club, we think about the dancing girls. We think about a whole lot of sexy wrapped around this music. And I guess that's why I'm tossing it out is that I don't think it's by accident that those things are connected. I think that there is something sexy about jazz. I think there's something that comes from the inside out.
Yeah, I mean, that even if you take the shows at the Cotton Club out, if you take the brothers out, and you just really concentrate on the music, it still will be sexy. Even without the rest of these elements, it is just by the rhythm and the fact that you can improvise on the spot in front of people. It's just so different. It is just so different. You can't be in love and show your love by playing something loving when you play jazz. You cannot do that with classical because you play something that's been written. Maybe the composer 300 years ago was in love and he wrote this piece, but now you have to play it as is. Without, you can with a feeling, sure, but you won't be able to convey your own feeling of love the same way you can by improvising on the jazz tune with rhythm in front of people on the spot. I think that's what makes it really unlike any other music in the world.
Yeah.
But the sexiness is there even without the brothels and the Cotton Club. To me, it is. I don't know. It's the way it's that's the way that the music is taken in. That can be taken in very analytically or very primarily. It depends, or both. Sometimes I take in the music with analysis in mind, and sometimes I just take it in the primal state. It's the beauty of it to me. That's the best explanation I can give you. I don't know. I'm sorry, but
that's fantastic, man.
If you had a scholar from New Orleans, a scholar musician from New Orleans, like such as Winton or Bradford, they probably could tell us. They could answer that question very well. Me, I'm just trying.
No. And that's the beauty of it, is because I did not want because I'm sitting here looking at this material, and this is what, you know, I mean, different scholars and universities and all these folks are saying. Some of it I agree with, some of it I disagree with, but that's irrelevant. I mean, I have my own experience of it for the last 40 years, as you do. But that's just as important. So as we factor in, that's why I'm reading what they said, and it's saying, Alex, what do you think, brother? Because I don't know about that. But I just know that there's this interesting connective idea. I know that when I show up at a gig, I've often said, particularly a jazz gig, obviously, that I think that the experience is very sexual. I think that I don't think that I think it is about rocking the whole room. I mean, perhaps the largest orgy ever known to man, because I don't think it's just limited to the musicians on the stage. I think it's being mindful of, you know, a full experience of everyone in the room, you know, everybody in the room being engaged. And I think that that's the beauty of what happens. And I look forward to that level of connection, you know, when the audience is connected and they hear what you're saying and they feel what you're feeling. And, you know, I think those are, you know, that's the beauty of it for me, you know. So, but I do think that it very definitely has a very strong component of something that happens inside and moves outside for me. You know, man, I don't know about you. I've seen some of your pictures and seen you in action a few times, and you know, you wind up bopping around quite a bit. I cannot sit down and play. I feel like I am like handcuffed because I have to connect with the floor. I have to be able to feel this thing before I can even play it, because I think that it comes from the inside to the out, you know. So so I've got a couple of questions that just came in on my phone, which I'm going to pose to you really quick. One is, how does Alex observe people socializing when listening to jazz? How does Alex observe people socialize when listening to jazz? How do you see people socializing when you're playing jazz? When
I play?
Yeah. I mean, how do you see them engage? You know, how do people
respond to the music?
Yeah.
It depends. It depends. You have some audiences at some venues or in some cities that are very responsive, very showing their love, not afraid to shout out, you know, that they like it.
Right.
You have other places who enjoy it just as much, but do not show it as much until it's time to clap or boo, whatever.
Right.
Luckily for me, that doesn't happen. So
right.
Very good. I mean, it's a tremendous show of love at any time I play on stage, at any given time, any given place, by people who know my music inside out, and or by people who come and hear me for the first time because somebody dragged them in there.
Mm-hmm.
Usually they come out and say, "Oh wow, I had no idea," blah blah blah. I'm so happy. I'm going to get all your music. You know, so it's a love affair between me and the audience when I play on stage, and I am definitely not into doing gimmicks to please the crowd.
Mm-hmm.
I'm very happy when I please the crowd, doing what I do. And to me, it comes with playing the song that I've written or that somebody else has written with as much feeling as I can, almost present it instrumentally like a great singer like Aretha or Luther or Whitney Houston would have presented that to an audience with that much feel, that much. I want the diction of my piano playing being like a singer. I think that's the ultimate playing right there.
Yeah,
I can do lick song. It's nobody will remember that except the musicians in the room. They
right.
say, "Oh."
Right. That is so true. Yeah, no, I mean, you're on it, man. That was something that I discovered, and I didn't even know I discovered it. And it was at the very beginning of my musical days, which was my attraction to Louis Armstrong, without knowing why I was attracted to him until maybe 25 years later. Then I was able to articulate it, and it was that I understood that what was attractive to me about Louis Armstrong was that his voice, the instrument, was an extension of his human voice. Just as he talked, there'd be a growl in his voice. That growl was in his horn. So that seamless, you know what I mean? When people say, find your voice, play you and that sort of thing. And so I understood that. So when you just said that, that's very powerful. And I think that's the ultimate, is when we can think it, feel it, and then it comes out exactly the way we intend it, when all things are cooperating, right? I mean, yeah, that's awesome, man. That is so awesome. Well, we are about to take another break, and we'll be back in just a moment. You're listening to Bill Myers Inspires on the Inspired Choices Network. Today, we're doing all that jazz with my guest, Mr. Alex Bugnon. We'll be back in just a moment.
Today, we are facing some of the greatest challenges of our lives, from our health to political unrest, the environment, financial uncertainty, and the nation's racial divide. Tune in every Friday at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for Bill Myers Inspires, as he and his guests take a deep dive into the issues that impact our world with an eye to exploring solutions. Emmy Award-winning actor Bill Myers is an accomplished actor, jazz musician, filmmaker, writer, educator, and speaker. As a biracial man who's both black and white, Bill leverages his background, talents, and voice through creativity, compassion, and connection as activism for social justice to focus on uniting the divide and compelling change. Bill Myers Inspires encourages listeners to look within themselves and take decisive action to make a positive difference. For more information, visit his website, BillMyersInspires.com, and sign in for the latest news and updates.
You're listening to Bill Myers Inspires here on the Inspired Choices Network. We're here every Friday at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Thank you for joining us. And now, let's get back to the conversation. We're back. You're listening to Bill Myers Inspires, and today we're talking about all that jazz with my guest, Mr. Alex Bugnon. This is April, and it is Jazz Appreciation Month, and I just wanted to back up and take a moment to try to figure out and discuss all the things that are attractive about jazz to others, and then also to musicians themselves. And during this last year, of course, we have been met with a pandemic, and I know that I truly believe that the great healing power of music and live music and what it's able to do for people has been a missing element out in this world. And there's a tremendous amount of hurt and sadness and things like that. And I think that has partially been exaggerated even more because of the inability for music to do its magical healing that it provides people. So, and that is not only just for the fans of music, but then I want to turn it now to discuss what happens with the musicians themselves over this very difficult period. So, Alex, how has this pandemic affected you? I'm not talking about just employment status issues. I'm just talking about the ability to get out and connect with community in the ways that we do it, you know?
Yeah, well, that's the greatest sadness of this whole thing is not to be able to commune with people, whether it's by music or just by visiting your folks, your friends. It's, you know, it put people in almost like in the hermits kind of a stage, involuntary. So me personally speaking, I have 2 little kids.
Yeah, you do.
So the pandemic didn't phase me too much, aside from the employment part, because I'm loving my family so much, and we've had actually we're blessed with a lot of room in and around our house, and we live in a small town, so that we didn't get affected too much. My daughters stayed home all last year after the pandemic hit, so we were together, having to find something to do with each other every day, all day. So that was the hard part. But as far as a musician, I kind of shut down. I shut down creatively because of the lack of motivation and the lack of time. Having these two really made me, and my wife kept working full time during the whole pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
And sometime at the office by herself, but she kept working. So I became basically Mary Poppins.
Right.
And tried to do everything. And so I kind of shut down creatively, which is really not good. I cannot think of anything to write right now, but I know that it will change. I try to practice a little bit, not as much as I should, but the creative part of that's missing is very hard for me. It's been really hard for me.
Yeah, I concur, man. There's been a lot of pivoting and having to occupy ourselves doing something else because just the thought about the music, you know, again, the motivation and that sort of thing, because music is meant to be shared. And so that part of the experience, you know, I don't play for myself. I really don't. But yeah, I totally get that. And I look forward to a time when you're able to get back on the stage and I'm able to go, hey, cheer you on and get myself out there gigging as well, man. So Alex, it has been a treat having you here today. This time goes really, really, really fast, as you can see. But I so appreciate you, man, and I wish you all the best. And I do absolutely love all the pictures of you and your kids chopping it up every day, Mr. Mary Poppins, because you're doing it, man. Well, thanks so much for being with us today, man. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Okay. Well, so like I say, I hope that we'll be on the gig trail very, very soon.
Yes.
So I wish you all the best, you and your wife, your kids, and so on, man, and your other projects on the side, which I won't bump you out on, but some pretty exciting stuff going on, man, in the meantime. So yeah, I appreciate you being here and being willing to offer something towards this jazz thing. So we are going to be here next week. Thank you for tuning in today, and we'll see you soon. Thanks so much. Thank you for spending your afternoon right here with us at Bill Myers Inspires. Remember, we're here every Friday at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on the Inspired Choices Network. Remember to take time this week to take a breath and look within yourself and figure out how you can make a positive difference in this world. Spread the word, and we'll see you here next Friday. Have a wonderful week.